Welcome, and thank you so much for being here tonight. We're really just delighted to be hosting an exchange across borders, the Beijing Music Festival at 25. This has been such an inspirational festival, started with the idea that music really can reach people around the globe. And their inspiration and devotion to bringing musicians and composers to an international festival in Beijing has been absolutely extraordinary. And it's all the more so at this time in the history of our little globe, when we need the connections that music can make all the more. And I think you will agree that tonight really does give us an opportunity to look at those shared values and those things that we love, and the musicians and composers that make that possible. My name is Rachel Cooper. I'm the Director of Culture as Diplomacy, although it seems I'm also doing performing arts and literature and many other things. And here at the Asia Society, we really are dedicated to an understanding of Asia and of the world from multiple perspectives. So we have a think tank called the Asia Society Policy Institute, but we who are on the cultural side and the art side have the great honor of bringing many traditions, some of them very old and some of them brand new, to share with people. And I think we have the fun part, personally. So, very briefly, I want to mention a couple of upcoming programs. Curating Contemporary Asian Art, which will be on October 6th at 6:30, which will bring a group of young Chinese and Chinese American curators to the Asia Society. It will also be online, so those of you who are not here in New York, aren't able to make it, please know that you're welcome to join online as well. Gandhi's India, Change Begins with the Last, a program that looks at the legacy of Gandhi, but also on some of the ways that we can create a better world. And we're working with APNIA. Gloria Steinem will be here, and we're really talking about the efforts to support girls and anti-sex trafficking. And finally, an American martyr in Persia, Reza Aslan, will be here with Jad Abirand on October 11th. A fascinating new book. So that's my plug for the future. But tonight we're really looking at the Beijing Music Festival, and Shuang is here to welcome us from Beijing. So let's see her video.
Director of the Beijing Music Festival, Shuang Zou. It's a pleasure to share with you the history of the last 25 years of the Beijing Music Festival, to cherish the memories of music celebrations at the EMF, and to exchange across borders with music once again. I want to send huge thanks to the Asia Society for this great opportunity. We will continue our mission and promise to welcome you back at our festival, and to let music once again connecting us all. Look forward to seeing you all soon. Till then.
And Shuang will be back with us live from Beijing when we get to the panel, so you'll have a chance to actually hear her in conversation with the panelists. We're really delighted, and you really couldn't do a program like this without having live music. And Zhou Tian, who is the Hangzhou-born, Michigan-based composer, has seamlessly mixed culture in his works, which have been performed in the United States and abroad. And he will be talking about the piece that is about to be played. But the Concerto for Orchestra was nominated for a 2018 Grammy, and his large-scale suite, The Grand Canal, was televised nationally during the 60th anniversary celebrations of the People's Republic of China. And playing his new work that he will introduce himself will be the extraordinary Jasper String Quartet. And we're so lucky and we're so honored to have them be able to join us. The schedule worked out. So Jay Freivogel, Rachel Henderson Freivogel, Andrew Gonzalez, and Karen Kim will be joining us shortly. The Jasper String Quartet is recognized as one of the leading American string quartets on the performance stage today. A recipient of Chamber Music America's prestigious Cleveland Quartet Award, the quartet has been hailed as sonically delightful and expressively compelling. You'll decide. The Strad and described by Gramophone as flawless in ensemble and intonation, expressively assured and beautifully balanced. This extraordinary group is about to come out. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the Jasper String Quartet. And now it is my great honor to invite Zhou Tian to the stage to introduce the work that they are about to share with us. Zhou Tian.
Thank you. Good evening. So 12 years ago, I was visiting Beijing, and I got a call from the Great Wall String Quartet and asking if you would write a new quartet for their concert tour and their debut album, also titled The Great Wall. So the theme was The Great Wall Plays the Great Wall. So right after I hand off the phone, I was in Beijing. So I took a cab straight to the Great Wall, and it was there. I heard a fascinating, inspiring performance at a local museum, and the performance was on the stone chimes of ancient China. And I was just fascinated by this unique, not so well-tempered sound. And in my second string quartet, I attempted to pick up those overtones and reconnected them into new melodies. And it starts on the cello solo and slowly expanded to the whole ensemble. And that forms the first movement of the quartet, called A Song from the Lost Time. The second movement is called Takata, and here is much more playful and rhythmic. And you will hear unconventional techniques utilized here to imitate the sound of guqin, an Asian Chinese instrument with plucked strings. I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much.
Magnificent. You know, you can't talk about a music festival if you don't listen and have music. And it was really present. It was just incredible piece. Thank you. We're just going to now show you a little video about the festival, just to have a sense of what is the power of a festival and how does it galvanize creativity across the world, really, and bring people together. Of course, a festival is also about people coming together to experience music. And we're going to capture some of that history in a short video, and then we'll have the panel. So if we could see the video while they're changing over to the panel, that would be great. Thank you.
Congratulations on the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Music Festival.
Congratulations on 25th anniversary.
Happy 25th anniversary, BMF.
Happy 25th anniversary to Beijing Music.
Congratulations on the 25-year anniversary.
I want to wish you many happy returns on the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Music Festival.
祝北京国际音乐节25周年生日快乐。
I want to congratulate the Beijing Music Festival on their 25th anniversary.
I want to congratulate the Beijing Music Festival with their 25th anniversary.
25 years of the Beijing Music Festival. This is something to celebrate throughout the music world.
Celebrating the 25th anniversary of Beijing Music Festival.
I wish I could be in Beijing with you guys, but I wish you all the best for this 25th anniversary.
Ni hao, I would like to congratulate Beijing Music Festival 25th anniversary.
25th anniversary Beijing Festival.
Celebration year of 25th Beijing Music. 谢谢。
献上我对北京国际音乐节25周岁生日的祝福。
There is great hope that classical music in China will keep developing.
Congratulations on 25th anniversary of Beijing Music Festival.
北京国际音乐节25周年华诞，请送上我诚挚的祝福。
Congratulations, 25 years. I like Tan Dun in particular on an airplane, which somehow felt so right. So now we have some of the extraordinary people who have taken part and really know this festival and its power. And I'm so delighted to introduce and invite our panelists to join us on stage. And I'll briefly read who we've got here, but if the panelists would join us on stage, take your seats now. And just so you know who's coming, we've got Jamie Bernstein, author, speaker, filmmaker. In addition to writing many articles and concert narrations, she has traveled extensively speaking about music, and in particular about the works and life of her father, Leonard Bernstein. Her film documentary, Crescendo, The Power of Music, has won numerous prizes and is now viewable on iTunes, and you'll get to hear a little bit more shortly. Du Yun was born in Shanghai and currently based in New York City. Come on up, Du Yun. And works at the intersection of opera, theater, cabaret, electronica, oral tradition, public performance, and more, and she'll tell us what the more is. In fact, the rest of you can come up as well. You don't have to wait for me to read this. Otherwise, the panelists may start dancing, is what I'm thinking. But her onstage persona as an indie pop diva with an avant-garde edge, that's you, says the New York Times. She was awarded the Beijing Music Festival's Artist of the Year in 2019 when the festival presented her Pulitzer Prize-winning opera Angel's Bone. Zhou Long became the first Chinese-born composer to win a Pulitzer Prize. Got 2 Pulitzer Prizes. Yeah. Come on, guys. Co-commissioned by the Beijing Music Festival and the Opera Boston. And following his graduation from China's Central Conservatory of Music in 1983, the Beijing-born Zhou was appointed composer in residence with the China Broadcasting Symphony. In 1985, he traveled to the United States on a fellowship to attend New York Columbia University's program, where he received his doctorate in musical arts in 1993. And he is currently the Distinguished Professor of Composition at the University of Missouri, Kansas City Conservatory. And finally, our wonderful moderator, journalist author Ken Smith has written about arts and culture on 5 continents for a wide range of print and broadcast media. Since 2002, has divided his time between New York, Hong Kong, and I dare say Barcelona, where he has covered China's classical music scene for the Financial Times, among others. A winner of the 2020 SOPA Award, is that the right way to say that? Okay, for Arts and Culture Reporting, and ASCAP Deems Taylor Award for Excellence in Music Writing. He is a former English language editor for the Hong Kong International Film Festival, a monthly columnist for Opera Magazine in Shanghai, a regular commentator, and an incredible moderator. So we're really delighted. And I want to take this moment to also thank Joanna Lee, who is somewhere here, but who has been instrumental in making this program possible tonight. So take it away, Ken.
Thank you, Rachel. As I was looking through trying to prepare some talks this evening and thinking about who to invite, we were looking at this, and I realized that this is probably the oldest relationship, I mean that with the Beijing Music Festival, that I have with any institution musically in Asia at this point. It's ongoing for 25 years. My first time going there was in 2001, in October 2001, to be precise. And if you remember something about that period in history, that happened to be just a few weeks after a very unfortunate incident here in New York with 911, which shut down pretty much travel for weeks. That seems like child's play now, but back then it was a very big deal. And when my first time at the Beijing Music Festival, my first weekend there included the China premiere of Nabucco, done by the Polish National Opera. The next night was the orchestra and chorus of the Polish National Opera doing the Mahler's Second Symphony, conducted by Krzysztof Penderecki. And the next night happened to be the world premiere of a cello concerto by Philip Glass, by the China Philharmonic, and I think its first or second appearance as the house band, the new house band of the festival. And it's kind of hard to top that anywhere in the world as a one weekend of offerings. The next weekend, I flew back, and it also happened to be Tan Dun's first appearance in China professionally since winning the Oscar. And the sad thing about all of this is that when I was trying to find my reviews, a good number of the people that I wrote for back then are no longer in existence. The websites are gone, the magazines are no longer there, and yet the Beijing Music Festival is still going at 25. So this is, I think, something really to be, to sort of honor and cherish in a way, looking back. One of the things that was amazing as I was going back here was how much a bit of history this seems. It was a very different time for America, for China, for the world. And we want to talk a little bit about that this evening, just for several people here. They've had not just one, but multiple appearances at the Beijing Music Festival, and that gives an opportunity to really think about how the festival, and talk about how that festival has evolved and how the world changed in between. Now, the person here who has been at the festival even longer than me is Jamie Bernstein, sitting at the other end. Now, she was there the year before, and I now have to say, to my wife's chagrin, I have a lot of concert programs at home that I still have of significant events that I've seen that I think are really important. I found also programs that I didn't attend, which is kind of annoying, until we get to a place where I found the program from the year that Jamie was there.
Which concert was it? I did more than one.
The first concert, and we were discussing earlier how COVID has ruined our memory. So let me just refresh your memory. This is the program book from 2000. We turn to, here we go. A concert in commemoration of the 10th anniversary of the death of Leonard Bernstein. Narrator, Jamie Bernstein. China National Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Michael Barrett. Selections from Candide, Wonderful Town, Peter Pan, On the Town, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and West Side Story. And the next night, and this was at the Forbidden City Concert Hall, the next night was, no, I'm sorry, the first one was at the Poly Theater. The second night at the Forbidden City Concert Hall was a children's event called the Bernstein Beat, which you've done many times for many different audiences.
However, I wish to point out it was not at night. It was a children's concert after all. So it was in the afternoon.
Okay, yeah, oh, 2 p.m. Sorry. Yes, I didn't get that far. Well, I want to know a couple of things regarding this. I mean, looking at how this came about and what the festival was like in those very early stages. How did that event occur? How did they come to you? How did this come about?
Well, it was a rather circuitous route, actually. My involvement with the Beijing Music Festival happened through a college classmate of mine whom I reconnected with at a reunion that we had had like the year before, Kathy Barbash. And Kathy Barbash was so instrumental, no pun intended, in bringing Asian and Western cultures together. And she was very much involved in creating, in launching the Beijing Music Festival. She worked with Long Yu and helped create their, you know, the whole, you know, mission statement. So Kathy Barbash was also very involved in bringing artists to the festival, and I was one of the people that she approached. So that was how it all happened, was through Kathy Barbash.
Now, was this a program that was pre-existing and you just fit to that audience, or was this something that you made especially for them?
Well, my children's concert, the Bernstein Beat, which is all about rhythm using my father's music, that already existed, and I had done that concert a few times already and would subsequently do it many, many times all over the world. The other concert we designed specially for the festival, and we brought singers with us to work with the China National Symphony. Now, this was a long time ago. This was 2000, and in those days, the orchestra had played very little 20th century American music. Maybe a little Gershwin, that might have been it. So they were very challenged by the Bernstein music that they had to prepare for this concert. And I remember that the rehearsals were very difficult, and the language differential was another element that made everything exponentially more challenging. And so I remember that for the West Side Story excerpts, the percussion was so difficult for them, and they had to have many what we call percussion discussions, where they had, you know, okay, you play the bongos, and I'm going to be over here playing the timbales, and then when the maracas come in, you have to run over there, and this is all. You really have to map it out, and this was something new for that percussion section. So there was a lot of percussion discussion. So I was thinking about the incredible difference between what that orchestra was going through in 2000 compared to 18 years later when they performed West Side Story film with live orchestra, when, you know, not only were they performing the score to West Side Story, but they were also performing it in sync with the screening of the film. And they were able to do this with complete aplomb and mastery. And I realized how far this orchestra had come in 18 years.
Well, we should point out that was a different orchestra.
Well, there is that, but the whole sensibility in Beijing by then had changed so much. It's true, it wasn't the same players.
Yeah. I mean, by the next year, the China Philharmonic, I mean, the first time I heard them was in the Philip Glass Concerto, and they actually counted better than the soloist, who was British. So that was a big step up. But I was also there for the West Side Story performance, and I thought it was remarkable.
It was fantastic.
Not just because of the Bernstein beat, I mean, not just about the beats, but about what went on in between. I mean, they were really able to carry a huge stylistic range in terms of the American jazz versus the Latin sounds, and it was quite impressive, considering that the conductor was also Chinese.
The conductor was Chinese, but everybody was getting the message in a completely multilingual, international way.
Well, looking back at those original performances that you did in Beijing. Now, you talked about a little bit with the instrumentalists and getting them up to speed. What was the audience like? Did you tailor yourself differently to that audience? And how did they respond?
I didn't really tailor myself differently. I just do what I do, and I talk the way I talk, and it doesn't matter where the audience is from or how old they are. I feel like I'm basically just me, and I hope I'm getting across, and I don't make adjustments. However, of course, I was not able to speak in Mandarin at all, and so there was a translator, and it was difficult because I would say a few sentences, and then I would let the translator translate those sentences. So, you know, that added a lot of time to the concert, and it made me very conscious of keeping my energy up because everything took longer than it would ordinarily. So I felt this responsibility to keep everybody attentive and keep things moving.
Yeah. Well, during that period, there was a remarkable increase in the sophistication of the Chinese audiences. I mean, they really understood a lot of things, and I dare say it wasn't just live performances, it was access to that kind of music, and you know, legally available internationally or otherwise. They were able to find all sorts of things, and if you knew where to look, you could find anything. You could find your father's young people's concerts. You could find, you know, DVD pirate copies of The Unanswered Question for people who were ready to brave that. And so this became a very known entity around China. And for even grown-ups who were learning about this music, the Young People's Concert was a huge, had a huge audience there. I mean, did you yourself notice a difference in sort of the understanding of Bernstein, of that the resonance of that name when you came back
I did
later?
notice quite a difference. There was more a sense of introducing Bernstein back in 2000, whereas by 2018, everyone seemed to have a good sense of who Leonard Bernstein was and what his music was, and it was much more of a known quantity by then.
Yeah. Also, the last time you were there, I think your book, Famous Father Girl, had come out in English, and you were talking about that. What kind of comments did you get from journalists, and what kind of questions did they ask you?
Oh, they asked so many questions, but they were curious about the book because they already knew who my father was. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been interested at all. But I had the sense that they very much knew who Leonard Bernstein was and what his legacy was for the world, and so that made them extremely curious to know more about him as a private person and a father and a husband and what his personal life was like, and that's what people can read about in my book.
Yeah. Now, I mean, one last question really about the educational component of this festival, which was really in place more or less from the beginning. How did you think that, how was that handled from your end as opposed to other kind of environments that you've dealt with?
Right. Well, my father was a compulsive teacher. Everything he did really was a kind of teaching, whether he was conducting an orchestra or telling a good joke or quoting from Shakespeare or just, you know, talking at the dinner table. There was this same sense of him tugging you on the sleeve to say, listen to this, I have to share this with you. And he was like that about music. He was like that about everything. And I think that my brother and sister and I all somewhat inherited this urge to share and teach. So I was completely thrilled and gratified that I myself was able to bring my father's educational sensibility to the Beijing Music Festival, and that they were so open to that it was very much a part of the festival's own DNA, was this urge to share education. And that's why the children's concert that I did was so particularly fun, and the kids were so attentive. I was amazed at how attentive they were. And in a nice little footnote to that concert, it was partially sponsored by McDonald's. And so all the kids had these little McDonald's flags, and I just thought that was so adorable. It was a real worlds in braiding together in the best possible way, especially since one of the ways that I had to explain complicated rhythms, no matter how complicated a rhythm is, you can always break it down into groups of 3 beats and 2 beats. And I called the 2-beat bundle hot dog. And I called the 3-beat bundle hamburger. So it was so perfect that McDonald's was sponsoring that concert. But in China, they pronounced it hambobo.
Okay, so to go from that, we go to one of the more memorable events that I can recall from the festival, which is Madame Whitesnake. And we have our composer here, Zhou Long. One of the things that, I don't think I ever shared this with you, but this is a bit of history. I had a discussion, in fact, my only lengthy discussion with Zhou Wencheng, the professor and your mentor and the man responsible for bringing basically a whole generation of Chinese composers to Columbia University. He felt very sad for your generation because you would never find an audience. And he was quite serious. He said, well, they're never going to be accepted as American, and they're not Chinese anymore because they've been out, and the Chinese people will never understand them once they've been abroad. Now, keep in mind, this was in the 1990s. And historically, it's probably not as much of a miscalculation as Thomas Malthus saying that the world will run out of food 200 years ago. But it's wrong for some of the same reasons, which is things happened that no one could foresee. Tan Dun won an Oscar. American music went in a way that not only, you didn't just have to reference the modern tradition, you were expected and encouraged to bring other things to it, your own personal background. So you were expected to bring maybe jazz or rock or tango or klezmer or Peking opera to your composition, depending on what your own background was. And also, it didn't gauge China and how fast that audience would become musically sophisticated. So, early in the days of that, I saw Tan Dun's music, an evening of Tan Dun's music in Beijing. I saw an evening of Guo Wenjing's operas. I saw Chen Shigong, who apparently had his first featured concert there in China since leaving. What was it like back then, as a composer, to have your music done in China? I mean, were there any organizations or other people other than the BMF who were bringing music from Chinese living abroad?
Well, I came to the States in 1985 to attend Columbia University. I find a little confused because my original works is very based on the Chinese elements. And mostly our education, we're writing in mostly tonal music. At Columbia, what you mentioned about Professor Zhou comment on us, I never heard about it, but I think Professor Zhou hoped us to still keep the traditional and ancient China culture. That's what his mission, to help us. But our education, our teachers, most of them trained from Russia. And even we studied the harmony system is Sobin. It's not really American tradition. At Columbia, we call this mostly second Vienna school, or close to that, but not anymore. So I got confused, but I thought that that's good experience, for me to explore more atonality, and to break what my original voice is, and eventually we can't really get rid of it because that culture is really in your blood. So talking about what the relationship with the Beijing Music Festival. I watched them, but I joined them probably in the 2007 when I finished Columbia and I live in New York mostly I stayed in Brooklyn for 13 years. Work a lot of different groups with the dance company, freelancing composer. Of course, people, some people already went back to China, like Ye Xiaogang, graduated and back to China, and we choose to stay here. But of course, we hope that our work, to be performed both in the West and China. So I got the opportunity to meet Mr. Yu Long, Master Yu Long. He said, what are you doing now? I said, I'm planning to write in an opera. So, oh, that's exciting. What opera? But the White Snake. So he showed his support immediately, and he said, I will co-commission the work and co-produced with Opera Boston. So that became the first American opera company to collaborate with a major Chinese cultural organization. This was very excited, for this project. We both premiered it in 2010 in Boston, and in the same year, October, at the Beijing Music Festival, gave the Asian premiere. And of course, Yu Long also asked me to write another piece, like Nine Odes. Yeah, it's also a major commission. It's a whole evening piece. The text by Qu Yuan. It's a great ancient poet. 75 minutes long. All 11 stanzas, 11 movements. So actually, the piece is conceived by Yu Long. Yu Long is a very innovative artist. Always think about, this composer, he's a very, supported this young composer like Du Yun and Zhou Tian. And always have new ideas, He said, I want Nine Odes on the stage, but I don't want a choir. I don't want a choir, they can't travel. So you could have voices, soprano, tenor, alto, and bass with a full orchestra. But I said, Yu Long, we have to wait. I'm working on the opera. And so that's why the Nine Odes was premiered in 2013, after the opera premiered. Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the opera for a second. That was performed, first of all, in Boston, as you said, and then in China. What was the difference between hearing a Western orchestra and a Chinese orchestra perform that piece?
Chinese orchestra, you're talking about the Peking Opera? Or
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in the Modern White Snake, we first have some idea to bring, to borrow some Peking Opera directly. Like some other Chinese opera also already did, and we can't do that anymore. So, but also have the idea to bring in a nandan, that means the male soprano, the real high voices. But we decided to set the whole opera in English, not combined. Right. Some Chinese opera combine English or Chinese, but this one, everything is Chinese, English. So we can't use the nandan. My English is not perfect, but the nandan, they have to spend years to sing in English on stage. So then we decided to use a real male soprano, like Michael Miniaci, as Xiaoqing. There's a lot of Chinese elements being used, but not directly quotation. I would say I have to really compromise. For me, it's a first opera. So I'm ambitious to make the opera, avant-garde. But the librettists and the opera company, they said, Zhou Long, you can write what you want, but we want an opera can be singing, and the audience can hear the melody. That's opera. So I said, okay. So then I borrowed some material, but explore some kind of a speech singing, like like almost like a 12-tone, but setting in the intonation into the Peking opera reciting.
Chinese Sprechstimme.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
And I also remember your orchestra writing being much more adventurous than the vocal writing, which was much more lyrical and traditionally operatic.
I would say most of my orchestral work also, accessible, more accessible. But the chamber music writing is very different.
Yeah.
I think doing also I heard some pieces very, atonality at Harvard, but it totally should change the style. Well.
So tell me about the audiences, because you're dealing with one audience in America which certainly knows opera, but they may not know the story, and in China where they know the story, but they may not know what a 20th century opera sounds like. How were the audience reactions different?
In Boston, at the premiere, they have one preview. That means donors all come, pay $1,000 a ticket for table and come to the first preview, and the 3 concerts, all full house. So they're waiting for this. In the 40, I think in the 40 years, Opera Boston never commissioned a new opera. That's the first time they commissioned an opera, and it's the first time for, as we mentioned, the Beijing Music Festival collaborated with Opera Boston, and also first time to use American singers, most of them American singers, to sing in Chinese opera. Yeah.
In English.
In English, and the audiences love it. They have more than 10 minutes, standing ovation.
Yeah. What about China? Because they don't get much opera in English. For one.
Yeah. In China, they can't really listen to the English. Even we have the subtitle in Chinese, and also because the Madame Wetznik is already pressed in the different media, like Peking opera, Sichuan opera.
Lots of films.
Yeah, television, show, and movie. They're familiar with the story, and they're familiar with the custom. But you can see some picture. We don't have video here. It's custom. It's very minimalism. The director is working with Philip Glass, so he's doing the very minimalism staging. During the intermission in Beijing, I smoke a pipe outside of the concert hall. There's a taxi driver attend the concert. I said, what is this? This is kind of they can't really take it.
Yeah. Well, the next piece that you did was actually in Chinese, as you said, the Nine Odes.
Nine Odes is totally in Chinese, yes.
Yeah. What was the reaction to that? How did that differ from Whitesnake?
That challenge for me as a composer, and also for the audience, and even for the singers, because the Xuyuan Chinese is ancient Chinese.
Yeah.
Why some lines I have to get the precise, the meaning. I read Chinese books and even the English translation, combine them to understand what each characters. Sometimes for the singers, they have to really search the certain character they don't know.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
So it didn't help the audience that it was in Chinese.
Not really. This is ancient Chinese poem. Yeah.
But interesting, though, that the combination of those two pieces, they are very different. I mean, they're sort of on extremes. Do you imagine any other organization that would have commissioned those pieces?
I don't know. Any other organization?
Yeah, I mean, other than the Beijing Music Festival, it seems like a very, very specific type of thing.
For the Nine Odes?
Yeah.
Well, if the Western, like if an American organization commission, I probably choose to have an English translation.
Yeah. Okay.
Setting in English.
Yeah.
Or French. In French, premiere this piece, I maybe choose French. I don't know. I can.
Yeah.
I think the French.
I know it's a hypothetical situation. No one commissioned it other than the BMF. So, but Madam Whitesnake is coming back. I mean, first of all, it had a second production in Boston, but it has a third production. I think we can sort of talk about that it's coming up rather than. I don't think we have specific dates we can announce yet. But the BMF is involved in bringing it back again.
Yeah, I think I guess so. Yeah, because they planned this past June in Paris was cancelled.
Yeah.
Because of the pandemic. I really hope the pandemic will pass. You know, we have everything in life.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this will still be in English, yes? The opera?
In English.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Have a different casting. Probably they will have French subtitle.
And a new director.
Yeah.
Entirely new show. Except for the
except
for the music.
What?
Except for the music, an entirely new show. Well, good. Well, we look forward to that, and it's the Opera Comique. It will be
far away.
the Opera Comique is doing the premiere. Is the performance? Is that correct?
Opera Boston.
No. It of this production.
This production I have
in Paris or no?
They produced the staging already, but they just canceled.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, moving on to our second Pulitzer Prize winner on the stage, we have Yun. And you are a bit younger than the rest of us, I have to say.
My feet doesn't even...
Yes, exactly. So in terms of actually getting to this, you were probably young when the Beijing Music Festival first started, so 4, 5?
No, I already came to college to Oberlin, so...
What was the buzz like about the music festival at that point? What do you remember hearing about it?
I do not know. I was a very diligent student. Locked myself in the practice room.
What was the first thing that you remember about the BMF? What was the first resonance?
Madame Butterfly. No. Baizi.
Whitesnake.
Okay. I need to warm up in speaking. Baizi Zhen.
What is that?
The name of your piece.
Madam Whitesnake.
Madam Whitesnake. No. It was your work. Actually, it made me. Yes. I'm a bumpkin. I don't know. I don't know things.
Well, okay. Madam Whitesnake was a Chinese story. Angel's Bone was not really a Chinese story. So audiences didn't really have that to latch onto. It was an entirely new piece and a very different musical world and a very different story. Can you talk a little bit about how this piece came about, how it went to China? It was in Hong Kong first, because I saw it in Hong Kong. But how did it make the journey on to China?
Yeah, before we go there, I wanted to actually say something that you mentioned about Zhou and Zhou's that line, which actually touched me quite a bit. I think that really, I just want to first say that there will be a new album that a tribute to Zhou and Zhou by really underground electronic musicians in China. And this is something I'm also part of that initiative as well. So the idea is to breaking the so-called avant-garde and really looking at Zhou and Zhou as this model of who really brought this thinking, and then because there are so many hip hop artists, right? Hip hop artists who would pay tribute to Zhlanges, or Björk would talk greatly about Boulez and Zhlanges. And I was like, why can't the subculture artists in China who are not classical musicians are paying tribute to Zhou and Zhou, right? So it's not about who doesn't understand anymore. I feel like that's the young generation's spirit. So I think that is also, I am going back to Beijing Music Festival, and I think that is why also Angel's Bone could have an audience at the festival, because not a lot of people told me that they had language barriers. They thought they saw a film.
Well, it was a very different audience, even from 2010, until you were there in 19, yeah? Yes. Yeah. And so there was a certain edginess, and Beijing has a certain edge to it in terms of its avant-garde audience. But that brings another question. Is there a Beijing Music Festival audience, or is there an audience in Beijing that likes adventurous music and they'll come to hear adventurous music, or they like classical music, so they'll come hear the Mahler Chamber Orchestra, or they like opera, so they'll come see the Ring Cycle? Are they separate audiences, or is it one festival audience? Did you get you were there in doing another performance of your own pieces, solo work. Did you get a sense that that was the same audience, or no?
I think having a festival is about building a trust with your audience. And it's not overnight. It's literally, when we're looking at the edition of each editions, you see the trajectory of not just the festivals, but reflection of our time and the country, really. And if that trust is built, and people will come back, because we wanted to explore, we want to see, we wanted to reflect, and that I do also wanted to commend Zhou Shuang. That I don't really know her before my production going there, and she would actually stay up all night and really go into details, worry about details before each production opens. And that kind of diligence and that kind of dedication, wanting to bringing new voices, wanting to bridge and wanting to look at new possibilities. And I think that is the power of the performing arts.
Yeah. Was there a big difference in the kind of audience you saw there and coming back than you remember when you were living in China?
Yeah, I remember Zhou Shuang was we were both very worried about Andrew's bone for obvious reasons. But then later she told me that it's one of the most searched thing during the festival.
Internet.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I will say that we don't have a lot of musical examples tonight, but all of these things are findable on YouTube. So if you want to get a trailer for either of these operas, please, by all means, search those out. And they're both actually, for different reasons, riveting pieces. And I can't recommend them highly enough. I think that now we have someone in Beijing who's been waiting very patiently. Can we bring Zhou Shuang to the screen? I think this is her, or will be her.
Hello.
There you are. Almost.
So nice to see you.
Nice to view you.
Can you see me?
Yeah. Almost.
Nice to see you all.
There we go. So nice to see you. It's very early for you.
It's very early, but all the excitement made me wake up early too.
Well, as the second, okay, I'll just keep talking because I know you can hear me. As the second artistic director of the festival, please, share with us a little bit about your coming here. I mean, I know that your professional life has been more in stage and screen and drama, of a spoken variety. But music was very much a part of your life growing up. So can you tell me how you're bringing your professional and personal experience to the festival now?
Well, music has always been part of my life. I grew up in a musical family, and I had early education of music, and it continued to be my DNA. So when I came across Beijing Music Festival, when I was actually still in Beijing before I went to the UK, participating in a lot of live concerts with my father, as well as operas that the festival brought in. So I was part of the younger generation audience earlier for the city. And the feeling was that it's one place to feel international in my hometown. And then we moved on to reconnect with the festival by bringing a children's production, Noah's Flood, from Northern Ireland, opera, all the way to China, to the Beijing Music Festival. And that experience, it really brought me to recognize Beijing Music Festival professionally, with its history in creating a stage for fresh new productions and young musicians, and as well as music education. So I was very touched because there seemed to be no boundary and highly collaborative and such amazing freedom in Beijing Music Festival stage in expressing opera. And it was also at a site-specific venue. So that had a spark in me. And then a few years later, I met Maestro Long Yu in London, the BBC Proms. And then he talked to me in depth about his personal vision in music and how music could share with the international audience, and how his personal goal is to continue the Beijing Music Festival with fresh new blood. So at that time, I already started to fantasize about what the festival might be like. And then a few years later, after I joined the Beijing Music Festival as associate program director, worked with the team on the ground for a couple of opera productions, I realized I became part of the team, and I was very happy to be there to just work as a program director. And it really came to my surprise and my great encouragement, led by Maestro Long Yu, to basically say, here we go, continue my legacy and doing more. And your mission is to do it differently and do it more.
Well,
so,
no pressure.
No pressure. Yes, I said exactly the same thing. No pressure. He told me about this in New York. I was very surprised. I said, wow, what have you got in mind? And he said, I'm waiting for you. What have you got in mind? So then, like what Du Yun just said, I reviewed all the past great moments of the festival, all the opera productions, all the profound memories and events. And then I started to bring out some outrageous ideas to Long, and he said, "Amazing, do it." So he's always this person who kind of lead us, but also just silently support us in every single aspect. I would like to say, like, looking back, the first few things I did at the festival, I think he was just watching quietly in the corner, and then he was so inspired by us, as well as just continually supporting all of the young people, and that really made me stay on and gave him my promise to bring the festival further. And he always shared something in common with a lot of young musicians and also established musicians, is to connecting not only China to the world, but to make the festival an ongoing context for people, international artists, to gather in this short space of time in Beijing and to create more and to share more and to bring new vision. And I think this is what we have achieved in the past, and it will be continued vision for us to do more.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you really have brought to the festival is small scale and very immersive theatrical dramatic productions, particularly of opera, sometimes of repertory opera, like Cunning Little Vixen, which turned into a nice stage piece called Vixen, which was reduced and with a smaller band and very much in your face in terms of audience, but also new operas that very much put the audience right there in the center. That is not exactly compatible with social distancing these days, but it was a very good run. And I'm curious, is that something that you did because that was your own personal strength, because that was something you had done in the West, or is it something that you thought China really needed to be brought up to speed with in terms of what was going on in the rest of the world?
Yeah, I was together, like doing Yun and Zhou Tian, our generation. I think we went abroad quite early, and we grew up with the context of the Western art development and live performance art development. So I was very aware of what was going on in the worldly city like London and New York and Berlin, what was happening in the opera scene and the new music scene. And this form of exploring this experience of as an audience to go into different kind of music experiences rather than just tie yourself up in a kind of classical ritual. I think this was something that was emerging when I started at the Beijing Music Festival as associate program director. So my idea was not to bring China some new things, but to make China be a new workshop for international artists like of my generation to create something together up to the beat with the rest of the world. So that context we want to create in time, in tune with the world in terms of doing new work and bringing new ways of presenting music to the expanding audience became my kind of agenda to start at the festival, and it went really well because we had new audience. We had audience that perhaps always came to the Beijing Music Festival, but quite a lot of audience, you know, they started, you know, possibly these operas were their first operas, and their first opera experience was quite different from the traditional festival opera experience audience. So that we achieved in working together. So co-production as well has gone to a different sphere, because a different kind of exploration, because we don't need to spend that much money, and we can make an opera a true immersive experience and very much toned down to small scale productions. So more repertoire and more composer new work can be achieved in our festival, rather than just everything is grandeur and big. And I think that's parallel to what we do as the DNA of the festival, bring the China new concept and making these cultures meet through music, and that's just opened up another semi platform. I think it worked very well, and it will be continued at our festival as well.
Yeah. Well, this has not been the greatest 3 years for any kind of festival in the world, and yet you've still managed to keep going in some format in whatever way possible. Can you tell us just how that worked for you? I mean, we have done our own thing over here, but tell us how Beijing kept going in the past, in the COVID years. How did the festival go in? How did you utilize technology? How did you use your online platform? Just kind of brief us on what's been going on.
I think before the pandemic hit, we already started to looking at technology advancement, and we had foreign artists and composers who use technology to give a vision of the future. And then when the pandemic came, we were stunned, and we, like everywhere else, we started to do plan A, B, C, D all the way to Z. And then we always felt like something happened for a reason. So it almost became a perfect time for us to explore what we always wanted, which is to bring the festival online. But we wanted to bring it with the style of the festival, rather than just use technology as a convenience. So we started to program in a very short period of time, thanks to the rich history and all the friendship brought in by the worldly Beijing Music Festival ever visited great musicians and artists. So we could pull up a program to have multiple productions, recordings all across the globe using Zoom and all sorts of online gathering. To put up a program of the non-stop 240 hours of music experience on our app. So it was quite something. It was already a review of the entire history of the festival, but also we managed to bring new work through this platform as well. So there were a lot of interviews, there were a lot of composed events with new aspects of music. So we managed to bring more world music, and also review of our past compositions ever commissioned at the festival in depth, with interviews and radio programs and video programs. So it was also then a great leap forward about the copyright aware in our festival that year, and not our festival but the whole of China, to make aware this industry with such difficulty. We are, as a leading festival, we protect musicians, and we have every way to make sure the musicians are heard loud and clear, that copyright globally is well deserved and needed to be looked at. So that became sort of a benchmark for that year. So ever continued, we started to have growing online audience. And China is, with Maestro Long Yu's legacy of the festival to start with, he continued to develop all these orchestras around the world. I mean, we have the 100 orchestra allies, this organization that had not only their performers constantly appear at our festival in the form of marathon and whatever, the music marathon, but also their audience then became our audience. So the national audience is, the number is tremendous. We just had, since the trial of bringing everything online, we had keep on doing this format. And then this year, we had this opening, just the gala concert for celebrating 25th anniversary. Surprisingly, we had almost 900 million audience online live to watch. So that is some number in China alone. So in the future, I think we can't escape from thinking about technology. And this would be part of our creative DNA as well, to bringing more new generation creators to come together, using music as a language to connect to the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Well, tell me, we're sitting here, everyone I know is doing their post-COVID agenda now of where they're going to travel and what they're going to do and what life will be like when we get back to normal. Assuming that we have a full festival open up again next year, what is the balance that you see? What's your ideal balance now between live events and media events, inviting people from around the world back to Beijing to actually be in the same room at the same time, experiencing the same events, and also local China projects that you're bringing to the stage? What kind of balance do you foresee in the future?
I think it will be a parallel experience of the live events as well as the online experience. But we will try to make the online experience and technologically initiated music project as far visioned as possible, which we kind of did with co-commissions such as Holland Festival, doing a VR experience of an opera that's newly written just for the format of the VR experience, for example. So that is to bring awareness of how music can be a fluid language to connect all culture without barrier, and use technology to make that even more impressive. But live events, gosh, we miss it, and we want to connect as soon as possible. And we're working in every guts we can to make sure that we return with a grand festival next year, and to have as many as you back to our festival, and just to have a celebration. This is always going to be, we believe this is always going to be the most important aspect of the classical music, which is to be in the same room and to be in the same thinking wave, and in tune with the music, and to be able to speak and to breathe together. So even if we're approaching technology for some kind of new vision, the intimacy is still we want to bring in as a message, rather than the convenience of it all. So I think in the future, not far, next year, we will have the world back, and we will reach out to the world. So excitingly, we are already in plan with international institutions and big and more and in every way possible to create a new context for young faces, new concept, and new compositional work to premiere all together at our festival. So this is time to wait patiently and expect something great.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us this evening for you. And I think we have some time. We can open up some questions to the audience. If we can have the house lights up a little bit so I can see people. If we have any questions for any of the panelists or for, I think Shuang is going to stay on screen or available for some questions.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Any questions? 2 Pulitzer Prize winners in the same room. Come on, guys. A famous father girl on stage.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple questions, actually. First, thank you so much. And I think for some people, they don't know who Zhou and Zhou is. So, and the project you just mentioned is really exciting, and I think it refers to what was just talked about, which is actually intergenerational. There's something about an older generation speaking to a younger generation, but in a totally new way. So I'd actually be really curious to hear from you, Yun, and also from Zhou Long about that idea of the generational change, and are there new things that are arising given the times we're living in?
Professor Zhou and Zhou is a great asset and a mentor to me. And our generation, most composers come to New York, brought by Zhou and Zhou, Professor Zhou and Zhou. I would say that his music is not performed very frequently, but his early writings really inspired me. When I was an undergrad, college student at the Central Conservatory, Professor Zhou and Zhou is the first American Chinese composer visit China, and gave a series of lectures. And he brought the 20th century composers' materials and introduced the other American composers like George Crumb and other. I don't think it is Takata, who's from Juilliard. Several composers he introduced to our class. And he brought, when we opened the university system, we don't have materials. The bookshelves is empty, and they still make collections, but at least we don't have these all 20th century Western music materials. And he brought some, sent it to the Central Conservatory. That's why I really, I already graduated and work at the Broadcasting Symphony. It's a very stable job, but I thought, I needed to further studies, especially with Professor Zhou. So that's why, and also brought Tan Dun, Chen Yi, my wife, Brad Sheng from Shanghai Conservatory. There's another Gan Ru, also a composer, a great composer from Shanghai Conservatory. And his vision, as I mentioned, he hoped our generation to study deeper into the Chinese ancient culture. Also, he introduced not only the Chinese culture, but the Asian, like Japanese, Korean. He said, you can't just stay in the one culture, but even the Western, especially I spent time in New York. I remember first concert I attended, Professor Zhou sent me to Philip Glass, Einstein on Beach at the BAM. That's really shocked me. So Professor Zhou always encouraged the young. By the time we still consider our young composers, but right now it's the next generation. I think the next generation, they're not really use a lot of Chinese elements. Is that true? Yeah, they have their new vision. I don't against that. But President Zhou asked us really get deeper into the ancient culture. I think when you're getting older, you will understand more. Yeah, that's my impression with my mentor, Professor Zhou at Columbia.
Yeah, that's a very good. That's really a father to son kind of relationship in a way. And now we're looking at the grandfather to grandkids. And so, I mean, so tell us about your project that you're involved in.
And then I think that we are talking about a cultural memory, right? Like that's a difference between a memory of the mental. I've seen the concert of Zhou and Zhou and all of your music in Miller Theatre, and I also personally visited him a few years ago. But because I've never studied with him, Zhou to me, and I'm also very, very influenced by him. People don't see it, don't hear it, but I know it. So it doesn't matter because when you see this figure and we talk to him, and when I see you, when I know like your existence, and I learned so much from your generation, not because we're sitting here, and it doesn't matter like on surface what music language you talk about, right? I also study Chinese, whatever. Should not say whatever. But studying oral tradition is one of my forte and my focus really. But speaking of this project, I'm also thinking, what can we really do as a reform, like a new imagination of tribute? If we only talk with one lineage to another lineage, can there be another? Because there's so many people like me who feel they're in debt to artists like Zhou and Zhou.
There's no one like you.
No, there are so many people. There are so many people like how I think we found each other, right? This is how this project came about, and it's actually through one of the really, really cool label. It was the formerly Verse China. Yeah, so it's really like they did a whole documentary on Chengdu underground hip hop, for instance. And we're also looking at like how we're not taking quotations from Zhou and Zhou, but really like paying tribute and what that might look like to each of the artists. And we don't have that. We must do this. We must do it. It's not for quotation. It's about. We also studied, looking at all this, the articles he wrote and the film that we have. Yeah. So this is kind of interest that I have is also looking at our skill, which is notation, which is classic, so-called classical music. But what is the cultural memory, right? Like from one artist to another artist, from one generation to another generation. I'm no longer young. I'm also looking at my future generation artists. And the next future generation artists, like they should have their own paying tribute to artists like Zhou.
Any other questions? Do we have any questions from?
Somebody in the back is going to run this up to you.
We also may have some questions coming in from our stream. So.
Hello. First, I want to thank you for holding this discussion. It's really helpful. And this question is towards Mrs. Bernstein, that they have done a revival of the West Side Story in a movie version. I wonder, how do you think about the difference that West Side Story have impact 20 years ago and today?
Oh, you're speaking of the recent Steven Spielberg film of West Side Story as opposed to the old one
Yes.
from 1962, whenever. Yes, the two films are both marvelous in really different ways. And there are many things about the new one, the Spielberg film, that are a revelation and really help you experience the work of West Side Story in all sorts of new ways. I loved the film a lot, and I loved the old one. The first one came out when I was a little girl, and so I was completely mesmerized by it. But you know, the world changes, and there are some people who didn't like the idea of remaking West Side Story because the first film was so perfect. But it's not perfect. It might have been perfect in some ways for its time. But there are many things about that film that are dated and that were treated in a much more contemporary way for us today in the new version. So there are a million fantastic things about both of the movies, and I think you should all go and see them both.
Any other questions?
I have this question for Ms. Yun. I'm wondering, because I feel like a lot of your work is not, as you said, on the surface level necessarily rooted in quote-unquote Chinese culture with Western perception. So I'm just wondering, like, as a Chinese diaspora artist, I feel like people always have expectation. How do you navigate or negotiate with that kind of expectation of Chinese element in your work versus what you want to present as your project in your art?
I pretend I don't understand. I think I'm also one of those very lucky ones that I find like-minded people and who believe in my vision at different stages. Rachel is one of them. And we really, like, throughout the years, and we actually presented with Chen Yi, the Kunchu. Actually, I have done Chinese element absolutely a lot. One of my upcoming big project is actually I can tell you now is a concerto with a pipa concerto with woman with many orchestras. So it's the question is how do I navigate I think as a woman artist, I also think that we have so many baggages, right? People see us with so many baggages, but us artists have even more baggages. That's our own personal belief and history and a family and all that, right? And then there's culture, and then there's society, and then there's all this different world. And I think that's actually very interesting if we could use that as our point of entry. If we understand that that's actually a freedom, but not a movement. So to me, that I just use that as my freedom, rather than thinking that I have to subscribe to other people's confinement. I
think we have time for one more question. We still have one more musical piece on the program, so take one more question and move on.
So this question is actually for Ken. I'm wondering, since you have experienced the festival for a long period of time and see its evolution from one particular style to what it is. So how would you describe that change?
It's been very different because China has been very different and America has been very different. And early on, I think people could get away with a lot because no one cared. No one really knew what was going on. And as there was success in the festival, people paid much more attention, so things got more difficult. And if Shuang is there, you can correct me if I'm misspeaking on that. but they had to compete with themselves, but they also had to think about what audiences were expecting and what was allowed in China at any particular time. And that has changed quite a bit, sometimes not just from year to year, but within each year. There's a lot going on that involved, a financial crisis, many different periods of international tension, health care, and health issues. I mean, this is not even the first disease that has crippled the festival in a way, because 2003, 2004, SARS was the first one that got in the way, and people were loath to travel at that point, particularly to China. So it was very difficult to put together replacement programs for things that fell through at more or less the last minute. So I think arts presenters everywhere have a lot of trouble putting things together. China is a perpetual challenge on many different fronts. And having prior success is no guarantee of future success. So what I've seen is just an increasing level of audience sophistication, as we mentioned, the idea that each year has to build on what has happened before. And what I think is one of the honorable things that the festival has done is that they have stuck with certain artists and grown with them and followed them. Zhou Long being an example, having not just one commission, but a second one that followed up because the first one went really well. People that get invited. Jamie gets invited back multiple times. Well, once every 10 years. I think you're due for another visit soon. But yes, there is a support among certain artists that to really grow with them, which I think that a lot of other organizations could learn from, rather than just commissioning, an artist a year and seeing how that piece goes, and then just sending it off into the world and letting it find its own way.
I guess one of the reasons I asked that question is also because when I was in Beijing doing research in 2003 or 2004, the Central Conservatory student would say that they had no exposure to contemporary Chinese composers because it wouldn't play, right? And so it's remarkable that these feature concerts of, individual composers were, put on from year to year. And that changed the scene, I think, in some ways. And imagine at the beginning it was exciting for everybody to see what was this all about that were famous outside of China, right? Finally, they could get to hear them in Beijing. So that, I just wonder, that mission is accomplished in some ways. And now it's moving on to something else, maybe?
Right, well, that mission was certainly accomplished. And I think one of the things that the festival early on in particular was interested in was showing people in China what the Chinese people have done abroad and bringing it back in and keeping them aware of that. I have to say, though, having heard many of these performances in America and sometimes Europe and back in China, they're sometimes entirely different works. I mean, yes, the notes are the same, but say in Amsterdam, for example, they will understand fully the modernist language with some Chinese sprinkled on top. And you'll hear the same piece in China, where they're not so big on modernism, but they know what the root source material is, and it sounds like a traditional piece with extended technique. And so they can be entirely different experiences from the same piece on paper. Okay, if there are no more questions, then I think we can move on to our next bit in the evening.
Yes, thank you, Ken. That was fabulous, all of you. And I do, and also just to remind you, we have one more piece and we have a reception. So you have an opportunity to really have a conversation. I was very inspired by Shuang's talking about the future and the new generation and breaking out of the boundaries and the encouragement. And that's something I think we all need to do. So I love that. I just love that. And I think that's what a festival should be. However, we have a very exciting moment. So Zhou Tian, can you come up, introduce our final piece? Again, another hand for the panel.
Hello again. So it's my pleasure to introduce the second piece of the evening. This piece is called Rhyme, and it's written for cello solo. So, you know, as a composer, I'm fascinated by just sounds. And one of those sounds are languages. Within the language, rhyme is always very fascinating to me because, you know, we use repetition of words. We would change certain pitches of certain words to make a point. We make a cadence at the end of the sentence, trying to deliver a message. And when you think about music, the universal language of it all is the same, right? In the music, we do the same. We stretch certain notes just a little bit longer to make a point. We change interpretations just like how we say the language. So I thought it would be a nice challenge to write a piece to sort of bridge the two rhymes, the musical rhyme and the language rhyme. And I could not think of a better instrument than the cello solo to do that, because cello is such a capable instrument, capable of wild colors and amazing techniques, but at the same time, it's perhaps the most closest instrument to human voice. So in this piece, you will hear three movements. The first movement is a rather dramatic opening. The second movement is a meditative largo. And the last movement is a playful and rhythmic finale. It will be my pleasure and honor to welcome back Rachel Henderson Fragglewile for this performance. I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you all again, and please join us upstairs for a reception, have a glass of wine, and let's talk music. Thank you.